Welcome to this webinar that we are having with Thomas Bradenfeld. You'll be learning how to use JavaScript to extend Pano2VR's functionality and its capabilities. And I'm really excited for this one. So we won't take long here. I just want to point everyone to the Q&A button that will open up the Q&A chat or whatever you want to call it, this window, and ask your questions there. Thomas will be looking at this tab for any questions, and please keep them on topic. If they're not on topic, we'll answer them in the background via text. And yeah, so enjoy and good luck, Thomas. See you on the flip side.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for your introduction. And hello and welcome, everybody. I see the attendees queue is filling up. And yeah, I want to go today, after last week's introduction into CSS and Pano2VR, I want to give a brief introduction into JavaScript and Pano2VR and how this both are connected and how you can use it to extend the features and the functionalities and how it works basically under the hood as JavaScript and HTML and CSS are the three ingredients Pano2VR is made of. And HTML is giving us the structure of the page. In the case of Pano2VR, usually it's a simple frame of 100% width and height playing the panorama for us. And CSS is responsible for all stuff to do with styling, and JavaScript is a motor. It's the stuff everything keeps on running, and all interactivity, all functions, all motions, and all this stuff is done by JavaScript. So if you use JavaScript, you have kind of access to this inner engine of Pano2VR. And I think the first third of my webinar today, I would spend to give a short introduction, how this is working, how we can get a grip on it, and how can we see it, and how can we control it, and how can we get a view into this engine. And in the last 2/3, I will demonstrate an example I have set up with some typical use cases you can cover with JavaScript interaction related to Pano2VR. So I have started here with a simple Pano2VR project. I prepared it a little bit. It is only one panorama. We don't need more by now. And I have put untouched simplex skin to it, so everybody is familiar with it. Using the standard layout, and so everybody should be familiar with what he's seeing here. If I'm outputting this little project by hitting the cogwheel and then throwing it to the browser, we see what we expect, a panorama and a simplex skin. And now let's have a look how we can get our first views on JavaScript and how this is working from the technical side. The absolutely most important tool you have to work this is the browser developer tools. I'm doing it with Firefox here, but it's pretty much the same, even the same shortcuts with Safari or with Chrome, and in Internet Explorer it is F12 to get the developer tools. I strongly recommend to use Firefox or Chrome because these are the both browsers which are covering the most technical aspects of a website, and Safari has some special stuff related to Apple macOS and iOS, and Internet Explorer has some special stuff related to Windows, and it's not as powerful as it is with Chrome and Firefox. These both are pretty much the same. And you can get it under Tools, Web Developer, or what the shortcut is you should remember if you are diving into this stuff is Command Control Alt C. And if you do this, you get this sidecar window, and the screen is covered in blue because he is now marking our Panorama div, and you can switch it off here. And if you're moving your mouse over the screen with this blue icon here, you can cover and grab elements. You see their classes on the tooltip, and you see their position in the code on the upper side of the right code window. This is the inspector, and mainly used to do stuff with CSS and discovering the structure, the layout structure. And on the lower end, you see the most important tool when you have to do with JavaScript is the console. This is this little window here. You can type in some stuff, and you can output some stuff here. And let's have a look to other sections of these developer tools. Some of them might be known to you. You have some responsive responsive displays and some rulers and screenshots and so on. And you have these console can be a whole window here if you switch to here. And you can have, and it's another thing, this is the window, it is called DOM. This looks pretty technical, and I don't want to go into any details here, but this DOM, let's have a look at this abbreviation. It is a document object model. And the document object model is everything you see here. The topmost object in JavaScript is a window. It is here our window from our local host, which is with the outputted Panorama from Pano2VR. And in this window, you have a document, and in the document, you have parts and you see and parts you don't see. And if you scroll a little bit down, then we have the first view on something we dive into later. This is Pano. And Pano is the object which is containing the whole Panorama player. And you see when you unfold it, there are some letters. Most of the stuff is pretty much not self-explanatory, but there are some a little bit later. There comes some stuff you might be realize empty hotspot, and it looks a little bit like it should have something to do with the Panorama. Here's a hotspot, is full screen, is loaded, and so on and so on. So you can explore and examine this document object model on this panel, and you can do it the other way with the console. And so let's have a look. And as the browser developer tools are capable to look into every aspect of this document object model, they are aware how this document actually works. And so we have here in the console the possibility to get some information about these objects. Now we know this object is named Pano. I should write it correctly otherwise. And here you see Pano2VR player, Pano2VR skin. And there is, as a preview, you see there are something of this stuff we had a look before in the DOM panel. And now let's type a point, a dot. And now you get a list what this object contains. And there are 3 types of stuff such an object contains. It has properties. It has methods. What can I do with this object? And it has events. And here you can, this is a method, you can add a hotspot to a panorama, you can add a variable, you can change something, and if you go a little bit further down, you can get some information from it, and you can have some mouse informations, and further down you have a section where you can set values to control the panorama, and you see you can set the full screen property from here. And we will see this a little bit later. And a little bit down, you come to the, hopefully, where is it? I'm looking for the events. Okay, let's have it. Events are usually starting with on, and so you can have access to the events which are relevant for this model. For this object in the document object model. So let's type get, and I'll type get field of view FOV, and then you say you can enter it and you get a result 70. It is 70 degrees. So let's zoom in a little bit into the panorama, and I copy it because I don't want to write it every time. Field of view, now it's 46 point something. And you can set the field of view the same way. So let's copy it, and let's set field of view and type in a number, let's say 120, and it should zoom out. So this is an interaction from outside we can have via JavaScript. The console allows to get to communicate live with this panorama object, and you can get information here with get, and you can set information with set. Not in all cases, but in some cases where it are the distinct values, you can use the get and set. Everything what's starting with get or set. And there are a lot of other possibilities. So this is our main examination board. We have to deal with JavaScript related to Pano2VR, and of course to inspect all JavaScript with all websites. As technically, the Pano2VR player is nothing else than a simple HTML page. It has some special 3D functions to show us the images in a sphere, and to show us a cube with tiled images and all this stuff. But in fact, everything is HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So it's technically absolutely no difference between a Facebook page and this one, or a simple HTML or WordPress page. And technically, it's everything. It's the same. So now let's have a look at one other end of the communication between Pano2VR and JavaScript, and let's go to Pano2VR and let's dive into the skin. And you can, I'm throwing this away here, I don't need it. I copied, copy the skin as I manipulate it to my, so where's the webinar? I'm here, JS start simplex. I'm usually putting it into my own folder, close it. And so we have start, $D, notes. With $D, you can see that it's in my project folder. And so I can manipulate and change it without changing the main template of the skin in the system folder. Let's just create a little button, and this is not a button. I want to have I'm confused. So text, and this is my button, and the text should be click, and I throw an action in it, and I say it's the most simple the most basic JavaScript action you can have. And I say go to URL, and then you can do the following. As there are two possibilities. So simple one is JavaScript and a colon, and then type a JavaScript command in it and say console.log. You will see what this does. Okay. And now let's add hello world, as all programmers do. And this should fire an event from Pano2VR to the outer world. So let's save it, and I'm jumping. Just let's save the Pano2VR file as well. I'm not going to play out with this button here, and I disabled the automatically send to browser in the preferences, which is very useful if you are developing with Pano2VR. Uncheck open after creation in the preferences, so you can use the same output and just reload it with Command-Shift-Reload to reload this stuff without using the cache, and to reload all external files in case you use them. And now you have here the click. And if you see in the console, you have hello world. If you write console.log, you force the JavaScript to output a message or something you want to know from inside of this Panorama or this project. It throws it here into the console as a message. And it is a very useful diagnostic tool, and to test things and to check, is something happening or is something not happening, or where's an error? And errors are also shown up here. And you can examine and check and improve it and fix bugs. If the same message is outputted, you only see a number with 4, 5, 6, 8, and so on. And this is a way from the skin, respective from the inside of the of Pano2VR to the outside, to the world outside of Pano2VR. So, so these are the principles how this stuff is working. You can use it a little bit different here in another way. If you have some more JavaScript to type in here, you can simply cut it away and just do an empty string on the first line, and then enter the other JavaScript commands. So you can write them line by line, which is much more better to read and to understand what you are doing here. Everyone who has joined our webinar last week about CSS, and we have entered some external files. You can do it here as well, and using a JavaScript file, type in the path to the JavaScript file, and take care that this JavaScript file is prepared to transfer to the output folder by adding this file or adding the whole folder. Usually for me it's the folder extras. I will show it in another project I'm going to show soon. So I don't want to dive too deep in these experiments here, because the first goal was to show how the main ways of communication are happening between the Pano2VR player in the browser window, the operation with JavaScript in the skin editor, and how you can information in and out in the browser developer tool. So I have no open questions yet. I think I can understand it because it was not very difficult up to here. Let's have a look at something I prepared for you with some more complex but usual stuff when you are using JavaScript to communicate in and out from and to the Pano2VR player with the surrounding HTML side and page, not site. So let's have a look at the recent files, and I have prepared a little fancy project for you. First, I show what this project is doing, and then I going step by step through all the code and files what I have made to get this work. And let's have a look. It's also a special skin. I manipulated, not very much, but a little bit. And let's output it and let's throw it into the browser. So we have the same panorama as before, but 3 others from the same location. And this is a little tool. You can switch, you can jump from one room to another. You see I have a little bit CSS with 2 custom typos directly implemented from the Google Fonts delivery network. So it's not locally, it's hosted by Google. Very easy and with only one line of code. And you have these 4 rooms, you can walk through them. The Pano2VR player is not covering the whole page. The gray part here below, it is not part of the player. It is a totally normal HTML part of the page. The Panorama player ends here. And I had integrated some interaction. If you change from one room to another, this menu changes and the text changes. And it doesn't care whether you use the hotspots or you use the thumbnail menu. Doesn't care. It works anyway. And if you use the menu and to check, the panorama is changing. And it is always showing the default view of the panorama if you're changing. And this is some ways of interaction. This menu sends a command to the Panorama player to change its node. It changes a command to change this text box here. And when the Panorama is changing, the node change fires an event to switch the menu and to switch the text. So it's a communication both ways. And now let's have a look how this is done. First, I added a custom skin, the same way as I did before. I opened the simplex skin and saved a copy to my project folder. And I didn't change very much here. And so we can come to it a little bit later. We have no external files here. I cleaned up these embedded style sheets, which is usually sending the standard typography with 14 pixels font size, and I typed in nothing in here because if it's empty, Pano2VR sometimes writes the default entry again in here. I didn't know why. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it happens not. So I'm doing a dummy comment in here so that it won't be changed. Maybe something Thomas can have a look in by time. And what's special here, I'm using an own normal.ggt, an own HTML template. To get this, you need to go to Preferences and to go to Files and right-click to HTML template folder and go into this directory and grab this normal.ggt. It is what's delivered with Pano2VR. You see I have here some other stuff and with my own creations, and this This GGT file, this HTML template, is living now in my project folder. And let's have a look at it, how it's looking like, JS. So we have the project here. Just ignore the _start folder. It's what I've done before. It's not really interesting here. And it's the project structure. Here's the original normal GGT, and here's the copy I manipulated. And now let's have a look how this code stuff is looking. I'm opening it in Visual Studio Code. It's my favorite code editor for this projects, or kind of projects. Let's have a look at the normal GGT. It looks a little bit strange here. I need to get it to another markup so I can read it a little bit better. A Garden Gnome template, GGT, an HTML template for Pano2VR, consists of different sections. GGF is a form section. This is what you are seeing in the output panel when you have this this stuff here. This is the form section. So what you see in this configuration manual. Then the GGS is some internal scripting stuff. Most of the time, its purpose is to assemble some code for the outputted project. Then comes pretty plain HTML with some inserts done from this code. So here's the title is generated automatically. I won't dive too close into this, and there are some parts I manipulated here. And this is the end stuff, and you have some markers here, cut here. If this is a part where the Panorama player itself will be inserted, and I have a little bit manipulation here. I left the upper part untouched, and close before the end of the head tag, I introduced some own stuff. So this is a reason why I didn't use the external files in the skin, because I'm doing it by hard coding here. What's happening here? What's all this stuff? Usually I'm using a combination of jQuery. jQuery is a JavaScript framework which does basically the same as JavaScript, plain JavaScript or vanilla JavaScript as it's named is, but it has a more convenient and more simplified programming structure. You can get stuff easier. And this is jQuery. It's extremely widespread, and everybody knows it who has even heard a little bit about web development. All this stuff is coming from a content delivery network, so it's only URLs, so I don't need these files locally. If you are concerned about data protection and privacy and need to build a GDPR or DSGVO conform website, you need to download all this stuff and put it locally into the extras folder. I just skipped this to keep things simple, and on top of jQuery is sitting a very nice framework. It's called Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a combination between a little bit JavaScript and a lot of CSS stuff, and it's extremely widespread layout and design framework originally developed by Twitter, and it is open source and it's extremely powerful, and a lot of websites are working with Bootstrap, and you can you can put together very nice sites and structural, very healthy sites with Bootstrap with a very nice and compact code. And it is a combination of this CSS file, a combination of just JS files for some interactive stuff, which is implemented into Bootstrap. After all the JavaScript has loaded, the sequence is very important. At last, I get my own JavaScript. And when it comes to CSS, it comes the Bootstrap CSS, and then comes my own CSS. And this is here the stuff I added for my own into the normal GGT. This for function and for design. Then comes untouched stuff. And at the end, below my the Panorama player, which is a cut here snippet line, you have custom content. This is a gray part, which I'm showing here in the Panorama side. The gray part is what I'm inserted here. It is, I call it tab box. It has the button bar with 4 buttons, and it had a content section with 4 divs, and only one is visible. The other are switched by these buttons and by JavaScript. And you see here some special classes. This is the power of Bootstrap. If you want to have a button, just type btn. If you have a navigation bar, just type nav. If you want to have this navigation bar behave like tabs, type nav tabs, and so on and so on. If you want to have a dark background, you don't need to write CSS, just type bg dark, and if an element is active, it gets a class active. If you want to write text, you don't need to care about colors and so on. And here the rest of the HTML page starts. So this is my manipulated normal.ggt with a basic setup for using jQuery and Bootstrap to get this stuff done very easily and compact. On top of this, I have my custom CSS. Here you see my fonts from Google embedded. One important remark, and for all attendees who joined me last week, if you use the import command in CSS with an URL, you need only one line, and with Google Fonts you can add several fonts at once with one line. Here's a Noto I implemented, and here's a Roboto condensed, and they just joined here by an ampersand. And here the GG skin is generally set of Roboto condensed, and the larger fonts are Noto serifs. It is pretty much covered in the webinar of last week, just a little bit CSS tweaking. And I have a custom.js, and now the stuff gets interesting. When I'm going to the browser and hitting Command-Alt-C or Control-Alt-C on the PC, I have here some commands, and I have some diagnostic outputs built in my JavaScripts. So if you changing the nodes, and the Pano changed to node 3, or clicked on node 1, this is this tab here, or node 4, and you can output some diagnostic stuff here to see whether everything is working. And now let's have a look at the functionality itself. And now I want to go through the code in the skin. It's not very much. And to go through the code I've written here in the custom.js. Usually I'm doing a container. This is pretty much a standard phrase used by jQuery. It is document.ready function. And then comes a curly brace, and the end of the block is here. And this is a block which is called when the complete document is stable. When everything is loaded, everything knows where it lives, what it does, how it is named, and so on. And this function, when this function is called, you can be sure that everything is defined, everything is stable, and you can address everything you know about without fearing to have this not already loaded or initialized. And what I'm doing here is pretty simple. In jQuery, you simply address objects on your page with the CSS style selectors. You have hash tab box ler. That is nothing else than what I'm having here. If you're going here to the lower end, you have hash tab box ler. This is simply the link of these buttons. And now you can attach to now you can events to this attach. You can attach to these elements events, and you attach a click function to this element. And now all elements which are matching this selector are listening to a click function. And inside the curly brace, the next curly braces, you see what it is doing then. And we have a variable button link, and the button link is, okay, when I'm clicking on such an element, it is called this furthermore, because you can write this, but sometimes it's very long. So this is an abbreviation for the element inside of a function. And this element, which is basically a link, it has an attribute. And this attribute is simply, where is it? I don't know the normal. It's real stuff here. This element is simply this. But it's like an anchor link, as an internal page internal link we have here. And you can have this here custom open to the site. So I'm just opening it together so you can see both stuff. So we have here the stuff what it's doing, and here is what it's doing, what it's doing. And so I I'm looking into this link, what is the href attribute, and then I save it into a variable. I'm delivering this variable to the console. And the next is, it's a JavaScript function. And if you have a JavaScript function, a JavaScript string, this is essentially a string, chain of characters. And every string has a method called substring, and the substring is taking a certain amount of characters of a string. And if you have substring 1, it means get the string from the second letter. The first letter is number 0, and gets the whole string without the letter 0. So it just turns hash node 3 from this entry, from the href. It just strips the hash off, and so I have the node. And now I'm using a function from the Pano2VR API. How do I find this stuff, and how can I get it explained? Let's move over to the browser, and I'm opening the most important page on the Pano2VR website covering this topic. It's the JavaScript API reference. And here you can see how these elements are working and how they are defined. It is divided into sections: setup, viewing, direction, and so on, and handling the panorama, stopping the panorama, and dealing with media elements. And you can cover pretty much everything what you can do inside the main program of Pano2VR to assemble your projects, or you can do in the skin editor. You can pretty much do everything by scripting with JavaScript. Everything is accessible from outside. This is an example code to get an hotspot, or to add an hotspot with certain elements. So you not only can add hotspots inside of the Pano2VR program, but you can also add it by a script. And you have special stuff covering tools, get node IDs, and so on, or get next node, get previous node, and so on. And here I have Pano open next, and you see how it's working. It's a little documentation. So you need the node ID, which is node 1, node 2, node 3, in curly braces to address, to force the Panorama player to move on to the Panorama with this node. And that's simply everything I've done here. Panorama, open next, curly braces, and here it is the node without the hash. I'm throwing it here into this command, and this makes the buttons here send a command to the Pano2VR player to change its node to the certain node. Pano node change to. This is here the command I have inserted here. This is the direction from my div section here on here below the Panorama, from the lower section, sending commands to the Panorama. Okay, there is some question. I noticed this Bootstrap is being loaded. Are those classes being used inside of the player or just for the area outside? The answer is is simple. You can use Bootstrap inside of Pano2VR because it's loaded for the whole HTML page, but here it's used only outside. But you can use it inside too. You can use Bootstrap classes inside of text boxes, of info boxes, or anything you like. It is one HTML pages, the Panorama player, and everything else belongs to one document object model. So I hope this answers the question. So now let's get the other way around. And here is the change div. Or it's here. When I'm clicking around here, when I click on the button, and here is the div here below is changing. This is automatically done by Bootstrap. It is one of these nice features Bootstrap have, because you can do these tab-controlled changeable divs only by CSS. That is it's a reason why Bootstrap is not only it's not CSS only, because it works together with its own JavaScript, and the construction is that if you call this a nav and you have links, and inside the links you have an A, and these data toggle attributes defines that this is a tab controlling a related div with some other, and this is corresponding to these tab panes inside a tab content. These are defined and reserved classes from Bootstrap, and it is working out of the box. You don't need to write any JavaScript to have this changing controlled here. But what you need, I wanted to switch the Panorama. When I changed from one node to another, I want to change this. So that needs an addition to what this div section is doing out of the box with Bootstrap. And now I have written a function. It is called change div, and it's doing pretty much the same as the Bootstrap JavaScript does. It adds classes and removes classes. If you have here these 4 tabs, they are in a normal state, and they have here they have an active state, which is black now, the background, and the 4 divs here showing up the content. There are 4 divs lying on top of each other, and only one is visible. The others are invisible with display none as a CSS property, and they are connected together. And what's actually happening to control all this is to make some stuff active or inactive. It is controlled by the class active. And so everything to switch this stuff, you're not doing it directly by JavaScript, you're doing it by removing and adding classes. This should cover one question Karin sent me before the webinar, because someone asked in advance, how about changing classes? This is the way you do it. You can work with remove class, add class, and there's a certain method. It is called swap class, and you can exchange some stuff. And here, what is doing, this function is doing essentially is it removes all active tabs from all of these elements, and adds an active class only to the matching element, which is named with the node ID. You see here it's node 2. Node 2. If you have node 2, then only the element div hash node 2 gets the class active and is showing up. The same is with the box, and first remove the class active from all boxes, and then add the class active only to the box you want to. And this function I made because I made this function because I want to control this from inside the Panorama. So now let's switch to the skin editor, And here is a construction I'm usually introducing into my skins first when I know that I need some external stuff to make my project work. I have an invisible empty container in the left upper corner. It is invisible and it is called scripts and actions. And here you have all actions which should work generally and not dependent on any element. And there are some stuff on config loaded on start. If something should happen anyway, what's happening else should happen on the beginning. It should happen on on events user are doing. And one of the most used cases is here you have a node changed event. When the node changed, then go to URL, and I'm just here opening it a little bit and fire up this little JavaScript snippet, change div. And now I want to the actual node ID of the Panorama I'm now just arrived in after the node change. And this is a snippet. I'm JavaScript get current node. You can use it here. You can test it in the, I'm copying it, and you can test it in the browser, in the console. Panorama get node is node 1. You see it here. And so you can inside the skin, get the actual node ID, but you need it here. You cannot use a placeholder because this is JavaScript code. The placeholder are only working in non-JavaScript code. And so you just get the node ID and submit this value with a function change div to an JavaScript, whoever is listening to this function. Otherwise you get an error which is talking, okay, this function is not defined. And so this event is fired from within. I did a little bit comments here, and that is pretty much everything what is doing with the interaction between the tab section here and the Panorama section, and vice versa. And I did build a little bit fancy stuff on top. Let's have a look here. I have put a link in here, and this link does this. So you click on a link and the Panorama is moving to a certain place. So what's happening here? This is an HTML section here, and I introduced some JavaScript here. Let's have a look how this is looking like. Here is the link. It is an empty link. It is only addressing a hash, so it does nothing. But on the click is catched by JavaScript. And here we have a function. It's called move2, and it has a value painting, or we have here on the other thing, a stone hall. You can have a look at the piano, and it is turning around and moving to the piano. And on the white wall, I think another one is the video screen. So you can have some descriptive links to point your users to some content in the Panorama. It's very useful, very nice usability stuff. People like that. And so I wrote a function which was named move2. It was addressed from within the HTML section, but it is doing some stuff in the Panorama. And now it's very easy. Here, if where is the node, where is the word which is transferred from your piano or painting, and after the function is fired, you check, is it screen, is it piano, is it painting, and then you tell the Panorama to move to a certain position, angle position. This is a pan angle, this is a tilt angle, this is a field of view, and this is the time. And in the JavaScript API, you just need to go to the documentation. Let's show you Pano move2. Here it is explained. You can even roll the Panorama, and you can even change the projection when using this function. It is very nice. Or you have a simplified function, move to default view, if you want to go back, for example. And this is a function which is controlled from the HTML content to move over to the Panorama and to control. And special aspect here, it's to move the view direction from within the HTML. So let's have a new questions. Can the project with all the JavaScript extension deployed? Yeah, that depends. Maybe it is necessary to have a certain control about the files are introduced, customized in the GGT. It is one way to keep this safe is to put the script and link tags are introduced in the GGT file at the top after beginning of the body tag. This is one possibility to do this. What is inside of the Panorama player, inside of the body tag, it is transferred to the WordPress plugin. I think it's pretty much the same for the Drupal 8 module, for the Drupal module. Can you use info node to open a Bootstrap module? Yes, of course. It's no problem. And you have access to all Bootstrap stuff inside of Pano2VR. That is no problem. Yeah, I think that was it pretty much. And I hope it was not too complicated. I tried to keep it simple and just to handle it as a working model for some more or less useful stuff you can use, and some basic interaction examples between an external environment and JavaScript, and to cover also some modern frameworks, because using Bootstrap and jQuery it's pretty much super common and everyone uses it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say Daniel's really nice there.
Thank you for the advertisement, Daniel. I don't pay Daniel for that.
No, Daniel's just saying, you know, for those who are going to be watching this later, if you're a little confused by everything here, you know, don't hesitate to ask Thomas privately for an individual coaching lesson, because he says he's done it and it was great and worth it, I assume, right? So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to Thomas. And do you have if you're in our Facebook group, then yeah, then Thomas is there. He's on our forum. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking mainly not that much on the forum, but mostly on Facebook. Sometimes I'm answering Facebook questions when I see it can be easily done, or sometimes I'm pointing people to the direction where they need to start their research. It is not that easy. It is that it gets a little bit. The learning curve gets a little bit steep, so it's another second slope after mastering the skin editor. The next level, enhancing your capability, is to dive into the communication with the JavaScript API. But I can recommend it seriously, because you can do a lot of stuff you can do in the skin editor, but sometimes it's more elegant, or if you know how to do it, and it's more compact and can be done with extensibility to other functions. And the more you dive into it, the more you are tempted to do more stuff with JavaScript, because you have more and even more detailed control, even as in the skin editor, which is very, very detailed and very granular of building interaction design. Of course, you can integrate some other technologies. Google Analytics. There is a Google Analytics component now. I'm integrated Google Analytics on hotspot and node change level with this kind of stuff. I think 2 years ago, and And everything what you can do with JavaScript can be connected to Pano2VR. Even people who want to track their visitors. Maybe you use Matomo, the former Pivik, and you have you can build your own tracker without losing the compliance to GDPR or something. It is the topic is very deep, and once you get hooked to it, it's very interesting, and you can do a lot of stuff. Just to name a little bit, to load external content which is not built into the HTML page and not built into the skin editor, but comes from outside. jQuery has very powerful load functions to load external HTML pages and snippets, and for those people who are a little bit deeper into web development, you can connect Pano2VR to database and to manage really huge projects, and so on and so on. And I like this very much, and it's absolutely worthwhile to take the first step of the learning curve to extend the scope of Pano2VR a lot. So there's another question came in. Isn't it a bit heavy in terms of additional data that need to be loaded? Not really. If I'm going to the network panel here, you control what is loaded on a page, and let's have disabled the cache and hit reload, and you see now where is all this stuff. Let's focus on JavaScript. It is not that heavy. The player is 250K, the skin is 800K, and WebXR streaming and Bootstrap. Bootstrap is 14K, jQuery is 24K. It is smaller than an image tile, in fact. And so it's no problem to use it, and it is absolutely worthwhile because it makes stuff so much simpler, and you save even to write code. And CSS code and HTML code. So it's absolutely recommendable to dive into Bootstrap. It's very well documented here, jQuery as well. And here you have the hosted libraries for jQuery and so on. And you have here Bootstrap. Bootstrap has an advantage if you load all this stuff. It's 4 lines of code. The Bootstrap CSS, Bootstrap, and there's an additional library called Popper for tooltips and so on. It's mandatory for Bootstrap, and jQuery is loaded together with it. So with these 4 lines of code, and if you get it from a CDN, it's blazing fast, and it offers such a powerhouse of functions. So it's no problem. Is it possible to have user input manipulate skin variables or panorama settings? Yeah, it should be possible. If you have a form field on your panorama and you let the user enter some value, you can transfer it directly to the panorama objects, no problem. If you want to save it anywhere in a cookie or in a database, you need PHP for it on the server. But if you only want to have it function live, then it's no problem to use this stuff only with JavaScript. Just ask for the form element value and throw it into a function which transfers it to the Pano object. So. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I got a background. My theater software is talking to me, and there's a very nice function. This I missed to mention. My pity. My fault. What's very nice is to use the skin variables together with external JavaScript, because you can use a very nice function. Let's have the browser here, and that's with Pano you can have the set variable value, and you have the set variable, and you have the get variable function. That's absolutely great, because you can change the values you are using in the skin editor from outside, and you can get them from outside. So it's a very nice nice stuff. With set variable, you need to enter you need to enter the variable name, a comma, and then the value you want to have. And with get variable, you only need to name the name. And so can just demonstrate it with let's go to Pano2VR and the skin editor and just grab a variable. I think we have here the variable with let's take this variable here, and there's something annoying here. Okay, just move away. And so, and now let's go to the browser and the get variable, and let's enter this thumbnail menu. It is true. And now let's do this. It's the opposite. Copy, and let's say set variable, and then set comma false, and this removes the thumbnail menu. So you can also control your interface elements in the skin editor this way. I hope the. Can you also change the placeholder values? No, placeholder values are delivering values and not accepting values. It's a big difference between a placeholder and a variable. I hope I'm right. I think so. So no open questions? Okay, I am right.
Yeah, okay. If there's no more questions, I think we can close it up. Thanks a lot, Thomas, for this. Yeah, you're right, Daniel. He's saying
yeah, of course, of course.
The questions will come later.
Yeah, definitely.
When you start putting it in there.
This is meant. This is not meant. What I did here tonight or today is not meant as a how to do something. It is meant as a very short, quick overview of what is possible and how the basic principles are working between the JavaScript engine of the browser, the document, and the object of the Pano object of Pano2VR, and how the principal ways of communication are working, and what the prerequisites with JavaScript are, and with JavaScript and with CSS and with some external files. Yeah, I think is mobile and player width in JavaScript. Let's check it. You can just everything. Yeah, it's in full screen, is touching, and so on. And I think there is some. Just check it in the API. So just mobile and is touching. Get is mobile. So you can the function, and you can get the running browser. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And it can be and it can be get by the diff containing the panorama itself. That's also possible. So let's have a look at it. So just get the inspector. I think it should be here. Something inside there. I don't know. Okay, but it's definitely accessible. So you can make your own tweaks to the logic blocks, which are checking, is it a touch device, what width has a screen, and so on. You can combine it with the media queries, the CSS, and you can also combine it with JavaScript. What you also can do, I forgot to mention, if you can use JavaScript plugins or derivative stuff from JavaScript from jQuery, sorry, because jQuery is such a big universe, and there are a lot of plugins, image galleries and carousels and accordions and all this stuff, and you can use this as well as a base on jQuery, and all this stuff can communicate via jQuery to and from Pano2VR.
Cool. Thomas, how do you prefer to be contacted? If everyone's on our Facebook group, I'll post that link in the chat right now. Is it safe to assume that they can contact you there or ask their question there?
Yeah, what's pretty much I think what's the most safe way is to contact me in Facebook. Send me a personal message. Usually I read them, not every day, not every hour, but I'm continuously on Facebook, and when I'm on Facebook, just hit my name. You find me somewhere there in the Panorama Pano2VR group. Then just my name. And just drop me a personal message and I will reply.
Cool.
And,
it seems the more we banter on, the more questions we get.
Can users add markers externally using JavaScript on a Panorama? What do you mean with external markers or with markers externally? Markers, you mean hotspots, I assume. Yes, I think I showed the functions add hotspot. This can be used for it. Yeah. So if you mean that, the answer is yes. Can you create a transition? Transition from what? You can have transitions when changing HTML content here on the base of just fade this div or move this feather or swipe in, swipe out. You can do this with jQuery UI. It's a sub-framework with user interface elements and with engine with user user interface elements to fade, swipe, or disappear, move, and so on. And you can integrate it into jQuery. It's just an additional library, load it after that, and you can use CSS transitions introduced by jQuery. There's a lot of possibilities to make transitions, and if you mean transitions inside the Panorama, you have the possibility to use the transitions when moving from one node to another in the output panel. I hope this answers your question. Okay. Yeah, so I think it pretty much is it.
I think so. So I'd like to just thank everybody for being here and paying attention. Thank you, Thomas, for getting us started at least, or showing us what can be done. Yeah, very, very useful.
Yeah, maybe we continue this someday. Yeah. Just drop a line if you have some requests or want to have some topics covered, or you want to know more about this topic. Then just drop a line to Karen support or to Martin, and or let me know. So we're collecting stuff, and if we get a critical mass of interest, we will respond to it, I think. As I said, just drop me a personal message on Facebook. It's the most reliable way to get in touch with me. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope it was fun, and you don't get a code overload now in your heads. But I think if you get a little bit more relaxed and have another second look on the recording and put it to half speed, then I think you get even more out of this session, and maybe you get hooked to this tech stuff, and it is really, really interesting, I promise. So you have a good night together, and maybe another time. So bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.